All right. So it all began actually with this. CCP created a universe for players to fight in. And a lot of them didn't like that. A lot of people got really angry about this whole universe thing, right? So, as early as 2003, in fact, we had a council. We had a council that hasn't been formalized. There were 9 seats on it, and plus 3 that were personally invited. And these people were, just random people. Anyone could apply, so it is now. But the difference was no election. We had this list of applicants, and we just basically pulled people based on their, age, experience in EU, who they talk to, and the whole process of communication has been formalized. So it was like, hey, dude, I have an idea here on like IRC or internal forums or something like this. And the biggest problem that I saw in it was the fact that even though you didn't have to sign any NDAs or anything like this, the discussions were restricted, which means that if you want to talk about SOF, you can't talk about SOF. And there were no summits. And no summits means no in-person meetings. And you can't even beat anyone, And because of those reasons, the council has been really unsuccessful, and unfortunately, we had to cancel the whole idea until 2007. And what happened then? These guys happened there. And this is the CSM one. So during the Fanfest 2007, this 25-page long design document is revealed for everybody to take a look at and to give feedback. And the first democratic election happens in May 2008. This was the biggest change to the council, apart from creating all of these communication processes and stuff like this. We've introduced democracy into the mix. And a lot of people liked it. Almost 25 people participated in the first voting. And here we are talking accounts, not actual people. And we changed a little bit how we actually structured the council. So we moved from 9+3 to 9+2. And these people were 9 people who actually won the election and 2 who almost did it. And these guys were not a part of the council until somebody would leave or resign or had to be removed, and they would just take a seat. And in the case when alternates would decline to go on the council would just run short. And another biggest change to the new CSM, CSM Mark II, the actual Council of Stellar Management, was introduction of in-person meetings that were called summits. And the first of which was held in Reykjavik, Iceland, for 4 days, June 2008. And since then, we had 10 amazing elections. So let's take a look at how does it look like to actually become a CSM delegate. What does it take you? So you gotta play EVE, obviously. And when the application period opens, which is normally 2 weeks, you can apply. The application is open on our website. You basically go out there, fill out the form, we receive it, and then the second part, the most important part, you need to submit your identification documents. Why do we need it? You need to sign an NDA eventually, and we must be sure that you are old enough to do it, and that you're willing to do it, and there is a real person standing behind. Change that we made, we actually don't reveal any personal information anymore. If you want it, you can do it, but we don't force you to. And we also ask our internal affairs department to run a security check on all of your accounts. So if you submit your application with 1 character, but you have 9 more, all of them are going to be security checked. I will explain why we need it. Obviously, you need to get enough votes to get into the CSM. We are running an STV system to do that, with right system to calculate the votes. You need to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And you need to set up communication tools that we provide since CSM 9. Hey guys, you like the communication tools, don't you? All right, let's talk about things that will stop you from becoming a CSM delegate. So if you belong to the excluded group, you cannot become a CSM delegate. There are a few groups that we exclude for a reason, and these are CCP employees, regardless if it's a developer or GM. None of these can run. ISD volunteers cannot run because it is impossible to be an ISD and CSM and have a life at the same time. We don't believe that's possible. Any of our interns, affiliates, partners, and anybody related to CCP cannot run. Employees of other gaming companies can't run. And I think that's about it. So unless you work at CCP or any other gaming company that is our competitor, you can't run. All right. So if your age is lower than is required, the change that we made recently says that if you're 18 years old or older, you can run for the CSM unless the age of the majority in your country is higher, in which case the minimum age for you is the age of the majority of your country. Before it was 21, and there is a funny fact behind that number. So many of you might know that the drinking age in Iceland is 20. And this was one of the reasons why we've set the restriction for CSM delegates to be 21 or older, because we don't want, forcing people to do illegal things while they are at the summit in Iceland, right?
But it wasn't for CSM 1, and then Charlie went, right?
Yeah. And age changed from 16 to 21 to 18 to 21, and now it's back to 18. And we're hoping to keep it at this mark and basically make exceptions when we need them, rather than the other way around, when we have 21 and we make exception if we feel like somebody deserves to be on the CSM, but they are younger. We'd rather have it as lowest as we can legally make it, and then make exceptions in case the age of the majority is higher in your country. So if your account is created less than 60 days before we actually start accepting applications, we can't allow you to run. The reason for that is because we want people who have some connection with the EVE community already, who have established this connection with other players and who can represent them, because this is what Council is for. And we also want to be sure that you are familiar with at least some basic game mechanics, and you can give us feedback on those. If your account is inactive, you can run. You can still switch skills in the game. I know there are a lot of alliance leaders out there who can represent their communities, but they don't exactly play the game the way most people see playing the game. They would see it on IRC, they would be on voice comms and stuff like that. They would do a lot of diplomacy between players, but they wouldn't, spend like 10 hours playing actually EVE. But if the account of a player is inactive, he can run for the CSM. Now the security check. You can't run for the CSM if you have had any records of any sort of violations. And this is what we check with internal affairs, and me as well. I can check if you've had any forum history, so to speak, as members of community team can do. Any of this, if you have any history, it won't mean that you will not go for CSM election at all, but it does mean that you have less chances to fully pass the check, because every violation counts against you, basically. And if you have a lot of recent severe violations, then we're probably going to exclude you on security reasons, because we want to make sure that we don't let anyone on the council who is not a nice guy. So if you don't have, at the time of voting, your identification documents, or if you don't want to provide them to us, you can run for the election. And if you're not able to communicate in English, you also can't run for the election. Some of you make some, jokes about my accent and all, but the truth is that we love our localized communities a lot. We would love to see more candidates and delegates from those communities, and unfortunately we've seen the drop of interest towards the CSM. And this is probably one of the reasons, but we can't really fix it. Because the nature of what CSM does is a bridge between development teams and players. And if you can't communicate in English, at least on some basic level, you're not going to be able to be that bridge. Because if you, for example, only speak German, you're going to need someone at CCP willing to spend the time and invest into helping you translate everything. So at least some basic skills in English you have to become a CSM member. However, speaking more languages means you have bigger audience. And if you refuse to sign an NDA, then unfortunately, even if you won the election and you're here at Fanfest and you're CSM 10, I give you this NDA, your 3 pages, beautiful documents, and you look at it and you're like, I'm not going to sign it. Then we just exclude you from STV script and we run it again. It doesn't mean you can't go for next election, but for this election, goodbye. So how all of these restrictions affected different CSM elections? For CSM 10, we had record in both applications and approved candidates. We only had 25% applications rejected, from which about 20% were due to identification documents. Hello to all of those Americans who don't have the passports. And I think 2 accounts or 3 accounts were excluded on a security check. And we are hoping to keep this pace of security checks and do all of them before the voting starts for future elections, because we worked out that even with 100 applications, that's possible. But it wasn't like that before. You can see significant drops there. They were due to, of course, drop of interest in CSM when we had these quiet councils, and there was also a thing called pre-election for a few years. What pre-election was, it's basically we would ask you to go on our official forums, create your campaign thread, and ask your voters to go out there and like your post. That's not the best approach, of course, mainly because it is not secure at all. Even schoolboys these days can hack the forums and get a lot of likes. And of course, because a lot of candidates prefer different method of communication. Some of you create videos, some of you go on podcasts, some of you don't use official forums, some of your audience is not using official forums. So it would not be fair to force you and your audience to go out on the forums and do this. And in case, the limit was 200 likes, and in case that we didn't have enough people to fill the ballot with 200 likes, we would just start making exceptions. And if you have to make a lot of exceptions, you don't have a really great rule. So this is approval for all of the candidates for all of the CSM elections. You can see that the first one and the last one were probably the most, active ones in terms of applications and actual approval. And I'm really happy to see that, and I'm hoping that this trend is going to continue for CSM 11. I'm hoping to see both more applications, and I'm hoping to approve more people for actual election. And now let's talk about what do you need to do to actually vote. So not everybody can vote, of course, but most people can. And you need to have an account that's been active and that is active, has been created at least 30 days before we've opened voting. If you're using hours for Plex to activate your account on the day of voting and you just use that to vote, I have bad news for you, because we are hardly working to make sure that doesn't happen again. And you need to submit the vote. I don't know why, but since we've created this UI on the website to vote, a lot of people go out there and drag and drop their candidates on the list, and they don't submit the vote. They just leave it out there, and then the election is closed, and you're like, okay. So who is not eligible to vote? Only these guys. CCP employees, neither with our dev accounts, GM accounts, whatever accounts, we can vote at all. Even with our player accounts. We, of course, play the game, even though a lot of you believe that we don't. And some of us have 10 accounts, like I do, for example. And, there's a few hundred people at CCP. And if we all go out there and vote, you're probably not going to like that, will you? And ISD volunteers can't vote. They, however, can't vote on their ISD accounts. So with their player accounts, they can go out there and vote as many times as they like. So let's see how did it look over the years. I'd like to say that I'm super happy with the results of CSM 10 election because we've seen increase in both the turnout and the actual increase in number of votes. The turnout compared to the last year has been increased by 3%. I unfortunately can't give you exact numbers. And the flat increase you can see here is over 15%. I'm not saying it's the best result we could get, but this is a nice trend. This was my first election, and I'd like to keep it raising for next year. So I've talked a few times about STV. Does any of you know what that is? One guy, two guys, three, four. That's like half of my audience. All of the CSM. All right. So STV is a voting system, obviously. And what it lets you do, it lets you select, in our case, 14 delegates in your preferred order. And what's going to happen during the calculation is we're going to look at how many people put this guy on the first rank in their ballot. And as soon as he meets the quota, we're going to transfer all of the votes to the next candidate on the ballot. And we're going to repeat the process 14 times to select 14 delegates. And at the end of each round, one person with the lowest amount of votes is going to get eliminated. He can, however, get back in the second round if the surplus of votes is going to be transferred to him. I know it's kind of complex. There's a lot of information about STV out there. And if you're interested, go out and check it out. We also released the raw data of STV voting, including the script. It's all available, and I will publish the blog about CSM 10 election, including that as well, so we can play with it. And the calculation method we're using is called right system, in case you want to Google and find more information about it. If I'd be giving you all of the info about STV, that would be a separate presentation. So let's look at what happens if somebody resigns or if we need to remove them. So before, it looked like this. We had alternates, the two people that were eliminated last. And no alternates, short council. That's pretty simple, right? With the new process that's been created because we've moved to a new release cycle, that means more releases, more information, more communication. We can't use that anymore. We can't afford to have short councils, especially when we have 75 approved candidates. So eliminated person is being removed from the ballot, which means if somebody decides to resign, we've seen an example in CSM 9, we just remove this person from the STV script and we rerun the calculation again. Like that person would never be there at all. And that gives us a different result. We're not going to do it, though, if there are 3 or less release cycles left until the end of the CSM term. The reason for that is because we host 2 summits per year, and they are really important keys of CSM duties. And if there are 3 or less cycles left, it probably means that you've missed both of them. And with the amount of processes and documentation and stuff you need to learn about the CSM, you're probably not going to make it in these 3 release cycles, because 6 weeks, new release, no way. So let's talk about internal structure of the council. At the moment, it's like this. Really simple. It's a group of individuals that represent their voters. And they all have equal roles and equal rights. We expect every member to be equally active, and we respect every member equally. It wasn't like this all the time. Does anyone remember this? Quiet. Nobody does. All right. So we had 4 roles, 4 officer roles available: chairman, vice chairman, secretary, and vice secretary. And chairman and vice chairman were expected to, process all of the communication between council and the CCP, and of course they were expected to be more active in the actual community. Host all the things, gather all the feedback, pass all the feedback, stuff like that. And secretary and vice secretary were people who are responsible for all of the publications that CSM produced, including the meeting minutes. And it didn't really work out, did it? We had insane delays by like month and month in publications of the minutes, and I'm not saying that's the fault of vice secretaries at all. It's mostly imperfect process internally. So we still keep this for people to use if they all feel like their council is going to be way more efficient if they use it. But at the moment, we treat everyone equally, and the system is there if you want it. But at the moment, let's talk about communication. Communication is a key part of council, and we always had email. We almost always had the forums. There was IRC in the mix at the time, and even there is now. Then we added Skype for instant messaging that also keeps history. So if you're in a different time zone, you can always go back and check it out. Later on, we're adding link meetings, which is a product of Microsoft, which lets us set up video conference where we can share screens, record the meetings, share it with other people who could make it. And our most recent adjustment to the communication process is that Atlassian Confluence. Why did we do it, and what does it let us do? Well, usually, this is how people see communication between CCP and the CSM, isn't it? And this is something I really feel really bad about, and really want to change it, and really like to show more. So why don't we show more right now? So this is a page from Confluence where one of the members of the CSM requests a feature. That's, by the way, in the game already. So you can see that the process is actually working. Confluence lets us collaborate between teams internally in CCP. And since we're the CSM, we can also add them to the mix. We produced all of the meeting minutes on Confluence. All of the CSM members, active CSM members, have access to it. They can go out there, submit their ideas, provide bigger feedback, submit bigger ideas if they don't fit in our standard form. We also have the biggest change, the pretty recent change that we're still working on improving, is the roadmap. All of the members of CSM have access to the roadmap up to 3 releases ahead. They can also see the page with features and stuff like this that is not tagged for a release yet, but teams feel like sharing it with the council. And due to security reasons, they don't have access to it all the time, but we have 2-hour session, I believe it is, or 1-hour session every week to review it. And we're going to continue doing this with the CSM 10. And we're doing this to ensure that you guys are always up to date on all the things. This is the biggest change for CSM 9. I'm really proud of that. Yeah. So what else did we change? We experimented here and there. And we did this. This is a council diplomatic shuttle that we've added to the game, both to celebrate CSM 10 election, because, CSM 10 has been 10 CSMs already, and to show that we actually take CSM seriously. When we put something into our creation, into our universe, this is serious. We're also giving those little things, 10 of them, in fact. Each of them represents one council, as you could guess. And it has a list of every member, either full member or alternate, that's ever been on the council. Those names are all in the game forever. And it has CSM 10 on it. And I'm really happy with who CSM 10 delegates are. I'm hoping you are too. I'm super excited about these guys, especially. And I'd like to show you more in detail how the CSM 10 election went. So this is CSM 10 versus CSM 9 votes cast by day. I'd like to point out that that wasn't me. I didn't do anything to drop the servers. They're just technical issues. And on the last days of CSM 10 election, we've released a video of members of CSM 9 from Winter Summit talking about how they feel about Summit and how they feel about Council in general. So these are 2 spikes that we had, and I'm really happy with how election went. You can see it's much better than CSM 9, except one thing. So Freedom Land, among other countries, always cast the most votes. However, we've seen a drop in localized communities, which is because we don't really have that much support for CSM in localized communities. And thus, the interest is dropping. We are hoping, however, to make the information about the Council more accessible by localized communities. These are French, Russian, and German, the languages we officially localize into. And we're hoping to see a higher interest next year, both by voting and by applicants. So we can bring more people to the Council, to the Summit. So what are the summits? At least 2 times per year, we made a recent change that we can do more summits if we need for a Council, you know. It doesn't have to be 2, but at least 2 times per year, we're gonna bring at least 2 Council members are guaranteed to come every year. And additionally, we can bring up to 8 members. That is also a recent change that we made. I decided not to go with a strict number of 7, 5, 10, 15. Let's just make it up to. When we need to bring more people, we can bring more people. But when we just bring people just to bring people, that doesn't do any good, does it? And we've also did this change. Summits can last up to 5 days. And the reason for this change is because the more we introduce CSM into our internal processes, the heavier is the load on the Council. And we have 5 to 9 meetings, sometimes even more, per day for each day of the Summit, which means that people have to spend up to 15 hours at the office talking to developers non-stop. So we decided if we need to, we can increase it up to 5 days. And all members of the Council, regardless of their location, can join all of the meetings remotely. And in addition to that, we're also recording all of the meetings, so they can be reviewed by anyone in CCP or on the Council at any time. And no, there's not going to be any stream from the Summit. So after each Summit, CSM members produce meeting minutes. And these are the things that you can see on the forums and discuss and stuff like that. Why am I saying that CSM members produce meeting minutes? Is because it wasn't always like that. So Vice Secretary would create actual minutes page for session. Then it would go to CCP staff, and it would be reviewed for any NDA breaches and stuff like that. It would be copy-edited a few times by a few people, and only after that it would be put in a bigger document of meeting minutes, and then after the Summit, sometime when all of these things put together, we can release it. So when we introduced Confluence, we changed it. CSM members can write their own minutes, and they can add them to the page that everybody is working on. Just copy and paste, really simple. Then we ask nobody to touch it. You don't need to touch it. They've already put the words down. Let them do this. Instead, just look at the page and tell us what's wrong with it. Just mark out things that cannot be released publicly at all, or just yet. And this is what we've done, and we've set a record of releasing meeting minutes 24 hours after the session has been held. Come on, where's my clapping? All of these rules that I'm talking about are supposed to be in a white paper. Unfortunately, they are not at the moment, which means that the white paper needs to be changed, right? So this is what we're going to be doing with CSM 10. We started this process with CSM 9, and we are really hoping that CSM 10 is going to be interested in it. And we will show it to you, to EVE community, after we are done with the draft. And all of the processes that I've described and all the structural changes will be added to the new version of the white paper. And the concept that we worked on with CSM is this. We want to split the document into a few smaller ones that give a different level of an overview of the council for different audiences to look at. If you're a media person, you don't exactly want to go through all of these graphs with voting and votes distribution and study this all. You want to know what council actually is and what it does. And for that, you would have a high-level overview of the council and its duties. And other document would be for people who are interested to actually become a delegate. And that would explain your rights on the council, your roles on the council, and give you introduction into the council. So after you join the council, if you won the election, the only thing you need to do is to sign NDA, which, by the way, you can do digitally without even sending us anything. And the part I want to have is keeping the history. All of this work that we've done, all of this information about elections should be out there for anyone who is super interested and super passionate about the CSM. They should be able to go out there and read about it. Because these people, Mom, I'm on TV. These people have done a lot of work to make CSM happen and to ensure that the communication is as best as it can get. But more than that, I'd like you to thank all of these guys. These are the members of the CSM that has ever been a part of the council. You should really clap here. All right. Do you guys have any questions? Do we have a mic for them? CCP Falcon is out there to throw rotten vegetables at me.
So I actually have multiple questions, so I don't know if
Shoot them
people, because I don't want to hog the mic. All right. So my first question was, you mentioned that interest in localized communities was dropping.
Yes.
But as far as I'm aware, CSP hasn't really reduced their CSM exposure in localized communities. Hasn't it always been the same? Why is it dropping rather than just staying low?
I'd say that we are not releasing enough information, regardless about CSM or anything else out there for localized communities at all. We haven't been doing it much, but I'd say that we always push all of our media stuff about the CSM, especially into localized communities, localized media. We would produce all of the marketing assets, bearing in mind localized communities. Except the last year, I don't think that any banners or anything has been localized last year. And we did it this year, and we've seen that the drop is still there from localized communities. And this is something we're working on. We've even created to test out special ISD department for Russian players, and they help us translate everything possibly we can translate and put it out there for people. And I'm talking about, translating and localizing the white paper, the meeting minutes, everything that's related to the CSM out there. And even the review blogs that we made just one, but we're of course going to continue doing them every 3 months or so with CSM 10. We want to localize those as well. I want people to see what CSM is actually doing, because at the moment it's like a black hole. You vote for somebody and then you even don't know if that person is doing anything. So we really want to let players know about that a lot.
All right. Anyone else, or should I keep going? You want? All right. So the other thing was, you mentioned you released a video at the end of the election period, caused a little spike. Why was it only released so late, though? Because I thought it was a really good video, but why not release it a few days earlier for people who notice it perhaps a bit late?
So unfortunately we didn't have the time to release it earlier. We have like a heavy load on our video guys, so that was the only time we could release it, unfortunately. Maybe next year we're going to try to prepare it in advance. Maybe put it as a part of 7 show, There are many ideas out there to explore.
That would be good. And then the last question, and I'll pass on the mic, is there were 75 active candidates this year. There's
Yeah.
always been a lot of candidates, even when it's been at its lowest. 31 candidates is still a lot of people to go through and read all their websites and their forum threads, and nobody's going to do that. Which is why I created Vote Match. But is there within CCP some incentive of making this whole process of finding out what candidates might be relevant to you more streamlined for the players rather than relying on some shitty third-party website?
It's not shitty. You're underestimating yourself. So we did provide support to Vote Match this year by localizing all of the content, all of the questions. Unfortunately, we can localize all of the campaigns that people put out there. And this is not the best way of doing it. In my opinion, the best thing we can do at the moment is to put the filters on the candidates. So when you're applying, you can also put what are the things that are most important for you, and then you could filter people by their interest, their, where they live, their age and EVE experience, stuff like that.
Okay.
Any more?
My question was mostly about the communication tools.
Mm-hmm.
What was the tool again which you used for the meetings?
It was Microsoft Office Link.
No, the last one you mentioned.
Confluence.
Yeah.
Yeah. We use a few tools by Atlassian. This is the company that produces those tools. This is a collaboration platform for teams. And this is also a knowledge management system. So people can share their knowledge with other members of their teams. And this is something we've used for a while internally in CCP for development needs. And since we started using it, like everybody in CCP has even their own Confluence page with all the information and processes they are related to, we decided why not try it out for CSM, and it worked out great. I mean, I'm super happy with what it looks like now, and there is so many things you can do with it. You can also integrate other tools inside, and we can integrate metrics, for example, inside of the Confluence page to share some information with the CSM without needing to send it like via email or something like this. It's really cool, and we're hoping to use more tools by Atlassian in the future. One of the things we're looking at right now is replacing Skype, and we've been looking for it for like years. And the latest plan was to move to either IRC or Jabber, but both of those require installation or kind of complex for some people to do. And we realized that we need something super simple, and we're looking in the direction of either Slack or Atlassian HipChat. So this is something we may explore in the next month or so. We've also starting to share files and provide email to CSM delegates, starting as of CSM 10, on our Google Apps platform that we use for CCP. So this should improve the process even more.
Regarding the discussions of transparency that we've had recently,
Yeah.
has there been any thoughts to publicizing some of the CSM's Confluence pages?
I just did.
Well, I mean, more so, so we can see what the CSM's recommending and how they're recommending it if that's effective.
Posting the screenshot isn't really the best way to improve the transparency. What we are going to do is we're going to put together review blogs, hopefully every 3 months or so after 3 releases or 4 releases, where we will let CSM members speak for themselves. We're not going to say like, hey, everything's cool, guys, bye. We've seen that this is a great approach with CSM 9 and their yearly overview blog. We didn't censor it at all. Like, we fixed a few typos here and there, but that was it. And we released it as it was, and people were super happy to see that with all of the negativity and the criticism in it. And this is something I'm going to continue to do, but I want to drop a few more things into it. I want to put stats of actual members' activity internally, because there is a difference between public activity of the CSM delegate and internal activity. You can still be a great member internally, but you may not be, you can be just shy, and you don't want to go out there and do podcasts and blogs and stuff like that. So we want to show people that these guys are still doing something. It's just you can't exactly see it publicly. By showing out these graphs, I really liked the idea of showing who attended which summit sessions, so we might do that for all of our meetings. We may as well put stats from Confluence and show those out. How many times somebody posted something, how many times they replied, left a comment, stuff like that. So we're going to work more with that data, and hopefully it will improve the transparency more. I mean, the best thing we could also do is to try to remove NDA from as many summit sessions as we can. But unfortunately, most of those are censored for your own sake, when we don't want to spoil something in advance, you know, these sort of things. But I'm hoping that the step that's going to be the first and the best is to actually provide the data to the players to look at what CSM are doing.
You say you video the summits, but unfortunately, of course, you can't release them. But would it be possible to release old ones? I don't know how long you've been doing the videos, but for example, in 5 years, probably there wouldn't be any NDAs left or something.
NDAs maybe not, but privacy is still out there. So we warn people that we record every session in the beginning of every session, and we are legally obliged to do that. And if it's been 5 years ago, we may not have the contact with those people anymore. And to release a video that has a person on it, we need to get their actual permission to do this. So I don't know if that would be possible. And I don't think that 5 years ago we were recording any meetings. Any more questions? All right, cool. I'll see you at the CSM panel. That's going to be in the same room in 15 minutes. And if you have any questions, or you forgot to ask something, or you're too shy, catch me. I'm going to be here, and I can answer all of your questions afterwards. Thank you.